So this activity that we're going to do today, okay, you're going to get the rest of class after I explain it to work on it, and you should be able to basically get it done, if not be very, very close, like within 10 minutes of being done. Okay, it's not designed to be a copious amount of homework. Okay, it's designed to be done essentially in a class period. So I'm just going to review a couple things, then we're going to do part of it together. So that'll be like free marks, okay? And then you'll have the rest of the class to work on it. So we talked about the big three the other day, okay? The big three methods of transport. We talked about osmosis, okay? And the key thing with osmosis, it transports only water. And it does that across the membrane to balance solutes, okay? And it's passive. Okay, we talked about active transport, how it uses energy to transport materials across the membrane and produce higher concentrations on one side than the other, so it's producing imbalance. But we said the most important of the big three is diffusion, because it can move anything. Okay? It does it within the cell. This is the only way material gets from place to place within the cell, is to diffuse through the cytoplasm. Okay? It is passive. It moves stuff from high to low, and it's slow over long distances, and it's also not targeted, which means it's not being sent to a specific place. Okay? The analogy we used was it's kind of like free shipping. Okay? Because it is. It's free shipping for the cell. Right? But it's very much a shotgun approach to moving material. All right, so what I mean by that is this, okay? Cells absorb nutrients and essentially excrete wastes across their membrane, okay, or through their membrane. That's their surface area, right? So the entire membrane is the cell's surface area, okay? But they have to transport material through their cytoplasm, which is their internal volume. That is a three-dimensional space, okay? As a cell size increases, the volume of the cell increases faster than the surface area does, okay? For a simple mathematical reason. If I'm calculating the surface area of something, only the length and the width really affect the surface area. There's only two things, because it's two-dimensional. If I'm calculating the volume of something, there are three dimensions to that. So as it increases in size, I'm multiplying by three increasing numbers. Whereas for surface area, this number, if this was a cube, let's say, would always be 6. Right? So length times width times the number of sides gets me the surface area of a three-dimensional object. Everyone okay with that? Okay? So if I'm calculating the surface area of a cube, only these two numbers increase as the cube gets bigger. But as the cube gets bigger for volume, all three of these numbers increase, so volume increases faster than surface area. Okay? This is bad for a cell. A cell wants to have a large surface area and a comparatively small volume, because it's got to get materials from the cell membrane to places in the cell, and waste products from, like the Golgi, to back to the cell membrane. If those distances are really large, then the cell's going to have problems, because it's going to take a long time to move material, because diffusion is slow, but remember that diffusion also spreads everything out. Okay? So the bigger the cell is, the less efficient it's going to become at transporting material because of diffusion. All right? So example being something like this. So this is a normal cell here on the right. Okay? So we got like the nucleus here in the middle, and all the little X's and O's are different organelles within the cell. Okay? If something needs to move from the cell membrane, so let's say it's absorbed right here, okay, to this organelle here, it doesn't have to go very far. Agreed? Okay. In this much larger cell, if something needs to be absorbed here and get to that same organelle, look how much further it has to go. Is that a problem? Yes. Okay? Diffusion is slow, so it's going to take longer to get there, and as it goes from here to there, remember that diffusion goes from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. That material is going to get spread out and like less concentrated, more so going over this large distance than it would over this small distance. Okay? That makes sense to everybody. Okay? It's like if you need to get from one side of Okotoks to the other, it only takes you about 10, maybe 15 minutes if you have my kind of light armor. Okay? And every light is always red every time you come to one. Right? But if you need to go from one side of Calgary to the other, even taking a direct route like Stony, okay, is still going to be 45 minutes. Right? It's just further. It takes longer to go further. So cells become very inefficient as they increase in size. So what does a cell normally do as it gets bigger? If it gets really big, what does it do? It divides. Okay? It's not by accident. Okay? A cell can kind of recognize when it starts to be less efficient. Okay? If it's too big, then it will simply divide. All right? Everybody okay with that idea? Okay. So here's the activity we're working on today. Have you guys got the Google Doc open?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to go through this together. I'm going to give you quite a bit of this one. Right? So this is like super easy marks. All right. So the problem we're investigating, how does the surface area relate to the volume in cells of different sizes? Would dividing a large cell into smaller cells affect the surface area to volume ratio? Okay, let's just think about that from a mathematical standpoint. Here's a really, really big cell. Here's 1,000 little cells in the same space. Would the ratio of surface area to volume be different for these two things? Okay, how much volume does this single cell have compared to the volume of each little cell in here?
It should be the same.
Oh, no, okay, sorry, I didn't say that right. Yes, the volume of these two shapes is the same, but this shape is 1,000 little shapes, each one its own cell. This is one giant cell, okay? So the volume of this little cell is obviously much smaller than the volume of this one, right? Even though they're the same, the organism is the same size. The surface area to volume ratio of this one is much better than this one, okay? Because instead of being one big cell, it's many small cells, okay? Everybody with me there? Okay. So for our hypothesis, okay, we want to generate a hypothesis about the relationship between surface area and volume in cells and how that can affect the functioning of the cell. So here's what we want to do. The if part. How do cells transport material from place to place in the cell? Diffusion, there's your if part. Okay? If cells transport materials by diffusion, you're only going to have to do the then parts. 5 marks for the then part. It's pretty easy. Okay? And cells, or organisms, let's say, of different sizes are compared now the then part is the part you're going to come up with, okay? But this is what it needs to talk about, okay? You need to tell me in the then part, what will be, let's say, the effect on surface area to volume ratio of size? So what I'm looking for here is cells with better surface area to volume ratios, or not, let's say better, but bigger surface area to volume ratios will what? Okay, what will they be able to do that a big cell with a poor surface area to volume ratio won't? Okay, that's the then part. Okay, and we just talked about that a minute ago when we were looking at this here. Okay. So if cells transport materials by diffusion and cells of different sizes are compared, then cells with large surface area to volume ratios will, you tell me. All right, you have a much neater version of this chart in your Google Doc. Okay? We're going to fill this out together. That is, we're going to do all the math together. If you look at the rubrics for this lab, this is 5 marks of 22 marks right here. and we're going to do it together. So everybody better get 5 out of 5 by essentially writing down all the numbers that I'm going to write down here. Okay? All right, so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at these 3 organisms. Okay? They're imaginary organisms because obviously organisms are not cubes. Okay? It's not Minecraft. Okay? Not everything is a cube. So, the first organism we're going to look at, we're going to call micro. It's a very small, single-celled organism. Okay? Its dimensions are 1 micrometer by 1 micrometer by 1 micrometer. That's imaginary, but that's what we're going to say. Okay? That's really, really small, but that's what we're going to say. Okay, and it's a cube. How do I calculate the surface area of a cube? Length times width times 6. Okay, length times width gives me one side times the number of sides. Okay, so for micro, my surface area is going to be 1 times 1 times 6. So my surface area will be 6 square micrometers. Oh, on there? Just make a 2 and then highlight it and go to it's text.
If you did control
Just
M.
Or is it control? No, control comma makes it subscript, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, then it's one of these. Maybe it's control period.
Yeah.
Control period makes it go up, right? Yeah, okay, control period. So highlight it and go control period. Or just go control period and hit 2, and then hit control period again. Okay. Okay, even easier than that calculation. How do I calculate volume? Length times width times height. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 1 cubic micrometer. Okay, because now we're talking about the interior volume. Okay, volume is in cubic units. All right, so that means then that our surface area to volume ratio is 6 to 1. All right, that's good. Anytime you have a big surface area to volume ratio, okay, where surface area is significantly greater than volume, a cell will be very happy because it has lots of area to absorb and excrete material and a very small volume through which to move it. That makes it efficient. Okay? Diffusion can handle that situation very, very well. All right, now we're going to look at macro. Macro is also a single-celled organism, but it is 10 times larger on each dimension than micro. Okay, so its surface area is going to be 10 times 10 times 6, which is 600 square micrometers. And its volume is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000 cubic micrometers. Now what's our ratio? Yeah, 600 to 1,000, or if I simplify that, 0.6 to 1. Is that good or bad? That's bad. Now the surface area is smaller than the volume. This means diffusion has to move materials over great distances, which is going to be much less efficient. Okay? All right, now we need to look at multi-micro. Here's the thing we need to understand about multi-micro. It's a multicellular organism made of many little cells. In fact, 1,000 of them. Okay, so in this box, in multi-micro, which has the same dimensions as macro, there's not one cell, there are 1,000 cells. All right, so even though, okay, we're looking at the same exterior dimensions and thus the same volume, we are not looking at the same surface area. Multi-micro has much more surface area than macro does. Because instead of having 6 sides, it has 1,000 cells, each with 6 sides. Okay? So, micro's surface area was 6. Okay? There are 1,000 of those in multi-micro. What's the surface area of multi-micro? 6,000 square micrometers. What's that make our ratio? 6 to 1. Do you think that's by accident that it's exactly the same as a single cell? Okay. It's not. This is the advantage of being multicellular. It's how we can be very big and not have a problem transporting material. Okay? If we were one really big single cell, that'd be it for us. You'd never be able to transport material from one side of a cell the size of us to the other using just diffusion. Okay? It wouldn't work. It's too slow, it's not targeted, gravity would become a factor. Okay? Like it's just not going to work. All right? But if we're made up of many small cells, each individual cell only has to transport material across that very small distance. Okay? All right. So that's all the calculations. Now you got that filled in. So now you got to do the analysis and interpretation here. So for question number 1, just because the wording is a bit weird, okay, it asks when the cube dimensions increase, and it says centimeters here, we did micro, from 1 centimeter to 10, so from micro to macro, okay, the increase is a factor of 10. That means each side is 10 times bigger. But what's the factor of increase for the surface area and the volume? So all they're asking is go back to your chart and tell me how much bigger did the surface area get for macro from micro. So how many times bigger is 600 than 6? Okay? And then for volume, how many times bigger is 1,000 than 1? See, the wording's really bad. That's really an actually very easy question. Okay? It's just the wording is terrible. Okay? And then number 2 is asking a similar question, but now it's comparing the 2 big ones, macro and multi-micro. Okay? So the size and the volume have a factor of 1. That is, they're the same size and have the same volume. Okay? But how much, calculate the factor of difference in surface area. So how many times more surface area does multi-micro have than macro? Okay? Question number 2 is just asking how many times more surface area does multi-micro have than macro? Okay, now for number 3, looking at these 3 cells, when each of these cells gets bigger, okay, it's asking for which of them would the surface area to volume ratio change? Okay, so if macro gets bigger, it essentially becomes macro, right? If micro gets bigger, it becomes macro. Would its surface area to volume ratio change? Yes. Okay, if macro gets bigger, will its surface area to volume ratio change? Yes. Okay, if multi-micro gets bigger, will its surface area to volume ratio change? No. Why not? It'll just put in more cubes. We grow by making more cells. Okay, so the surface area to volume ratio for multi-micro wouldn't change because it would still be made up of all the small little parts. There you go. We just did the answer for number 3 together there. Okay. All right. Now, 4 and 5 are asking about these 2 pictures here. So number 4 is asking about this picture here. And I've put the dimensions on here because they're not on yours. Okay? So A is 10 by 10 by 10. So it's just like macro. Okay? B is 10 high, 5 wide, and 20 deep. And then C is 1 millimeter wide, or 1 millimeter wide, 90 millimeters long, and 10 millimeters tall. All right? What you need to do is calculate the surface area to volume ratio for each of these. and then you're gonna compare them, okay? What we wanna find out in this question is, does the shape of a cell affect its surface area to volume ratio? Because here's what I'll tell you. The volume of all three of those is almost exactly the same. Okay, like really, really close, effectively the same. Okay, all of those three boxes have the same volume, but do they have the same surface area? Okay, so calculating the surface area is going to be a little bit different because they're not all cubes. A is a cube, so you can just go length times width times 6. Okay, but for B, you're going to have to calculate the area of the front and multiply it by 2 because there's a face in the back that looks just like it. Okay, calculate the area of this top, multiply it by 2 because the bottom looks just like that. Calculate the area of this face, multiply it by 2, and then add them all together. Okay, that'll get you the surface area. Same process for this one. So you got a little tiny bit of math to do for this one, but it's not hard. Okay, then you're going to compare the surface areas. Right? Does the shape of the cell affect the surface area? You need to explain. Right? So I'm looking for a bit of writing for the answer for number 4. I want to see the math, and then I want you to tell me. Okay, does the shape of a cell affect its surface area to volume ratio, and would that affect its ability to transport material? Then question number 5 is saying, all right, here's 3 real cells within the human body. Your liver cells are like A. Your skin cells are like B. They're slightly flattened. Your nerve cells are like C. They're really skinny in one dimension, but they can be up to 1 meter long, going from the base of your brain to the small of your back at the end of your spine. Okay? You can have some nerve cells that are 1 meter long, even though they're a single cell. They are 1 meter long, but they're super skinny in one dimension. Right? So number 5 is saying, okay, the liver cell is small in both volume and surface area. The skin cell is more like box B. The nerve cell can be up to 1 meter long. How have the cells adapted to deal with the problems of surface area to volume? So to set this up for you a little bit, a nerve cell is going to have blood vessels running beside it all the way down its length. Would a nerve cell ever have to diffuse material from this end of the cell to this end? No. Okay? As long as it's got a small dimension, it's only got to diffuse from the blood vessel to the cell and from the cell to the blood vessel. Okay? Which is not very far. All right? It's never going to have to do this. Right? So you can kind of talk a little bit about that in your answer for number 5. Okay? For number 6, it's talking about a red blood cell. Red blood cells have a biconcave shape. Okay? That is, they dip in the middle. And what's the job of a red blood cell? No. Your red blood cells transport oxygen. Okay? Does this shape help them with that? They carry the oxygen on their cell membrane. That's where the hemoglobin is. Okay? Does having this shape where they're indented in the middle give them a better surface area than if they were just spherical? Right? That's what that question is talking about. All right, and then number 7, this is what we've been talking about all day. Most materials get from place to place in the cell by diffusion. What effect would a low surface area to volume ratio have on intracellular transport? So thinking of macro and how it works compared to micro. Right? Then copy paste your hypothesis, tell me whether our math would support it or not, and you're done. There's no sources of error here because we didn't do any measuring. Okay. Questions? All right, still got a half an hour. Okay, should be able to get pretty far into those questions, I would think. Kelly, yeah.